Michael Strange.
Andrew Bisco.
Sean Ham.
Leslie Carruthers.
And I believe I heard Julie Webb speak, but she
Yes.
spoke at the same time that Andrew Bisco did. We have a quorum present and we will proceed at this time. And I believe John Hunt is probably on the phone, but not able to communicate back with us. On March 16, 2020, Governor Greg Abbott granted a request by Attorney General Ken Paxton to temporarily suspend a limited number of open meetings laws to the extent necessary to allow telephonic or video conference meetings in response to the coronavirus COVID-19. In accordance with those suspended rules, we certify that the notice of this meeting was posted online for at least 72 hours prior to this emergency meeting. Number one, although members of the board are not gathered in a central physical location, we do have a quorum in attendance at this meeting by video conference or telephone call. Number two, we are meeting by use of Zoom video conferencing, which allows for two-way communication between the board. Number three, as we would in any person meeting, members of the public who have followed the instructions on the meeting notice for registering to speak during the public comment portion will have their comments read in the comments portion of the posted agenda. Number four, all other meeting procedures will adhere to the board adopted procedures to the extent practicable. Number five, an audio recording of this meeting is being made and will be available to the public at a later date. And we apologize in advance for any unforeseen difficulties and ask for your patience as we navigate unprecedented conditions. So the first item after roll call, let the record reflect that we do have a quorum present. We have a number three, public comments on agenda items. Has anyone called in with public comment?
There have been no comments submitted.
So no comments being requested by the public. We'll move to item number four under business items requiring board action. A, discuss and approve revisions to policy DEA local compensation and benefits. Mr. G.
Okay, the purpose of this is if we want to receive FEMA funding for this disaster, then we have to have this in our board policy. We do not have this policy in our policy. So basically you're just adopting it so that we can basically get reimbursement from FEMA if we so choose to do so.
Is there any board member who has any questions or wants to discuss any issue? If you can raise your hand, I'll recognize you. Andrew, I do not see you. Do you have any issues?
No, I don't.
And in case, John, do you happen to be on the line? All right, I have one issue, and that relates to the language in both the, I guess it's actually the DEA local. I know that came from the attorneys. In the portion of it, in the second line where it says, in accordance with such authorization, non-exempt employees who are required to work during an emergency. If I recall our prior resolution, we were speaking of a very specified set of employees. And I would wonder if we want to add something like certain non-exempt employees, thereby designating those who have to come in or go into an environment which is of concern versus a non-exempt employee who is working at home. And I'm just raising that question to the other board members. And I'll open it up. Does anyone have any questions or concerns about that now that I've raised it?
I will just speak on this because that may be a good idea in the fact that we're having to go back and revise our initial resolution that we had passed on March 16th for this purpose. So putting that into this language, into this one would be beneficial as well, I would assume.
So does everyone understand my suggestion, although I don't think it's proper that I make the motion? So
No.
is there anyone out there who can perhaps make a motion to include the word certain between the words authorization and non-exempt employees with regard to DEA local?
And that's on the action sheet.
Yes, when we get there, yes.
Okay.
It's the area that's in blue, the very first sentence. It's the first clause, between the first clause and the
Right.
word after the clause. Authorization, comma, and then non-exempt, adding the word certain before non-exempt.
Yeah, I agree with that.
May I have a motion?
I motion that the board revises the policy from the DEA local as proposed.
Motion by Mr. Bisco,
Second.
a second by Mr. Ham. Any further discussion? And I think since we're online, we probably have to go through a voice vote. So I'll just call the roll as I see it. Mr. Ham,
I vote in favor.
Ms. Carruthers,
Yes.
Ms. Webb,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Bisco,
Yes.
and Mr. Hunt, if you happen to be on the line. And I vote yay as well. That motion carries unanimously. We now move to item B.
Did John
Yes.
Hunt vote?
I couldn't hear anything from him. Did anyone else hear anything?
He gave us a video. He gave us a thumbs up there.
He did?
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay.
show that unanimous. Moving to item B. There's a resolution on premium pay for non-exempt employees. Mr. G,
Let me unmute here. Okay. Basically, when we passed the first resolution on May 16th, we were uncertain how long this was going to last. And I guess the way we were going to be working and having to work from home. Since we have passed that resolution, we basically said all non-exempt employees. Well, we have certain non-exempt employees that will be working from home, and we have other ones that we're actually calling in to work at the buildings. The employees that we are bringing into the buildings, those are the ones that we want to pay time and a half. Everyone else should be able to do their regular jobs from home. And so we want to basically change the resolution to reflect that.
and in a similar fashion, if you're looking at the actual resolution, in the second paragraph in the whereas sections, the very last line to be consistent, where it says approving the payment of increased compensation to those employees required to work during the closure. I think this should read those or drop the word those into certain non-exempt employees. So it is consistent. It's already covered in the section 2 below that though. So I suggest that if someone's willing to make a motion to delete the word those and in its place add to certain non-exempt employees.
It needs to be a separate motion to change the resolution. Is that what you're saying?
I think you can make the motion to approve it with that change, and if it's seconded, that would work, I think.
Okay. I make a motion to approve the resolution on premium pay as presented and as amended.
And so for clarity, Leslie, that means in the second paragraph, the last line, the word those will be dropped, or that word will be dropped, and the words certain non-exempt will be inserted in its place.
Got
And
it.
with that, got it? And with that clarity, is there anyone who'll second that motion?
I'll second it.
I had a question still.
Okay, we'll
sorry.
come back. There's a motion by Ham and a second by Mr. Bisco. Mr. Strange.
So the previous one, April 7th or 6th, whenever we had that board meeting, 7th, was for non-exempt employees, time and a half. We were paying them that because they were essentially doing more work than the same employees that were at home. So what are we saying here? What's this one?
Great. Let me clarify. So we had maintenance cafeteria workers that were being brought into the buildings to work, but we have other non-exempt employees such as paraprofessionals, secretaries that are working at home, not being brought to the buildings, and basically distinguishing between those two is what we're trying to do. Because the first one we passed did not distinguish, and now we're just trying to distinguish between the two.
So time and a half for those that come into the building, as
Yes.
opposed to those working on. Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion needed on this item? I don't see anyone indicating yes, so then I'll go through the roll call again. Mr. Ham,
Yes.
Ms. Carruthers,
Yes.
Ms. Webb,
Yes.
Mr. Bisco,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
Yes.
Mr. Hunt, I can't see. Does anyone see his indication?
He said yes.
Yeah.
That's a yes. And Mr. Clark votes yes. That motion passes unanimously. We now move on to item C, discuss and approve resolution to delegate certain authorities superintendent. Mr. G.
Okay, I believe at our very first meeting when we were looking at the roofs and all this was taking place, Mrs. Webb brought up the prospect of giving authority to the superintendent in this time. And some of these changes are basically based off of that. As I spoke to you on the phone the other day and was explaining the need for the meeting, as we have gotten answers to several of these things, some of these issues were popping up. These were recommended from our attorney just with things that they're doing from other districts. If you don't feel comfortable with all of these, giving me power or certain powers for 90 days within this time frame on certain of these things, then we can adjust it. But these were the ones that our attorney recommended based on what she's seeing with other districts.
Is there any discussion on this item? Anyone who has an issue, please raise your hand or turn on your mic and speak up.
Now, I don't see any in the first one or in any of them that says the time limit on those. And, oh, there it is, 90 days is the, okay. Maximum duration, 90 days. I just wanted to make sure that there was is a time limit, and at least we've discussed it. Is the 90 days, if the emergency order is lifted before the 90 days, or we're still gonna be use it as the 90-day period as a stopping point?
My recommendation would be that it would be up to 90 days. And then at that point, if you needed to extend it, we could extend it. But if it's a shorter period of time, that it would be dictated by the circumstances of when we come out of this.
Okay.
But
So we're looking at numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's the ones we're considering. And
I
you
had
said
7 items.
yes. Yes, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Sorry, I was on the wrong slide. So I'll give you an example. The very first one, we have an April break coming up. Whether we maintain that April break or we do something differently, considering the situation that we're in, and April break is no longer what it was before, and how we could possibly alter the calendar to sit there and accommodate our flex time and still get our minutes in for the time that we need to get in and meet the waiver requirements.
So to be clear, what we're saying is there would be no technical April break, but we're anticipating a year ending sometime pursuant to the normal calendar.
Or sooner, based off of the leaving the April break and accounting for the April break at the end of the calendar. Our employees have already accumulated flex time over this year. And that flex time was to allow them to have the April break. And basically it stays within, right now we've just got our at-home learning, our online learning, all that up and going, our Google Classrooms, computers passed out, and to sit there and stop that practice and then try to start it back up again, I think would be detrimental. So trying to find something to where we can incorporate that, but yet adjust our calendar the way that it needs to be adjusted.
So maybe you're saying you're taking off days at the end?
Yes.
But to be clear, that's not what this resolution is talking about. This resolution is saying to give you the authority to make that decision without asking the school board.
I'm just giving you one potential way that we could do that. So,
Right.
to accommodate things, yeah.
I think for sure there's definitely some things that need to happen quickly, purchases, things like that. But to me, I don't see why there would need to be a rush to, I mean, why we couldn't meet like we are now on certain of these things like the calendar and stuff. I think part of our job as the school board is to represent the community. And there's some items like this, like the calendar and grading, other things that the community obviously is impacted a lot by, and we're supposed to represent them. If we give away all that authority, what's our purpose?
And we are still scheduled for a regular meeting in April and May, correct?
Yes, April 26th in May, but this spring break will take place before that time.
Okay.
Well, perhaps, Michael, are you wanting the board to sound in on the issue of the spring break?
Well, I mean, in this case, it's asking about giving the authority to change the school calendar. I mean, I'm not saying that we absolve the entire resolution, but I don't know if is this an all or nothing? Do we have to do all four?
I believe that's what I said earlier, is that you know, if there are pieces of this that you're uncomfortable with, then we can, you know, whatever. Like I said, these were things that were recommended by the attorney because of things that they're doing with other districts.
Can we go ahead and discuss it one by one instead of as a group then?
We certainly can. I mean, we can go through and, I mean, we can go look at number one and say, do you want to hold off and further discussion, look at 2, 3, 4 and see if everybody is comfortable with those? Maybe do things in groups that way. Would that be okay, Mr. Bisco?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, let's look at items 2, 3, and 4. Does any board member have any significant issues with regard to 2, 3, and 4 and delegating that authority to the superintendent at this time?
None from me.
No, I'm fine with 2, 3, and 4. I think those definitely deal with case by case basis, or seeking outside agencies like TEA and stuff, which obviously require time. Yeah, I'm okay with 2, 3, and 4.
I open up, anyone else? Leslie showing thumbs up with 2, 3, and 4. Julie?
Yes, I'm good with 2, 3, and 4. And really, I don't have a large or a big concern with number 1, because I think that falls a lot. I mean, I don't think Mr. G is going to change our calendar in any way that's not compliant with TEA. I mean, his hands are tied on a lot of that. So that to me isn't as big of a concern as maybe some of the others, but I don't have any concerns with 2, 3, or 4.
I guess
So
my
then-
question, oh, sorry, go ahead, John.
I said, look, well, I'm not hearing anybody say anything bad about 2, 3, and 4. So really now let's drill in and focus on 1. I think there are 2 issues here. One is, what do we do with spring break? That's the most immediate issue that has to be decided perhaps before our next meeting. And then secondarily, you could say, we don't want to give them the authority to number 1, but we still need to decide what to do with spring break. So I really think that's kind of how we have to look at it.
Mr. G,
Right.
is there any other date that you can think of right now that, other than spring break, that would be affected by this? Or
No, you know, we had that period right after our March break where this all happened, and we had that period of time, and we weren't really doing anything as far as instructionally at that time, which is when we were trying to get everything set up. But trying to make that retroactive is probably not the best practice. And so moving forward, instead of stopping now, so we just got everything going, and stopping now and then picking things up would probably not be beneficial. And I could see some detriment to that. I think that the best practice would be to sit there and put that time at the end and just have a sooner stop date to accommodate those flex hours.
Would it be helpful perhaps to change number 1 to reflect to give him the authority with regard to this spring break, and then we address what we do with that in the regular meeting in April? That give you more time to assess all the options and do a thorough presentation on that issue?
But I think, the reality is we have to have so many 76,000 or 76,500 minutes of instructional time. We have waivers, which is the next one. We're going to have some waivers that adjust for that, which is the state's already applied it. And you're basically just giving me the authority to apply for that because you're approving those waivers ahead of time. So really, there's not really at this point in time, our year is pretty much done. So there's not a whole lot of change that's going to take place other than that April break.
So, okay, I guess my confusion is we had those week and a half in there. We had spring break, and then we had a week that was nothing. And then we had a week that was just kind of virtual e-learning, but no designated. So that's 2 weeks of kind of, are you saying we need to stop early and we'll just waive those to get our days?
Those will be
Remember,
covered through the waivers.
still-
What I'm saying is this April break that's coming up is basically part of our calendar, and it's basically what our teachers are being paid off of. And they have accumulated flex days already to account for that time. And we'd have to do something with our flex time if we,
Because they would have worked too many days,
yes.
even with the whole week that we were doing nothing. And
I don't believe that it's best practice to try to go backwards and try to make that cover that.
Also, I don't think the teachers were doing nothing. A lot of them were setting up and getting prepared for the next week.
well, I'm sorry, I used the wrong term. I didn't mean they weren't doing anything. I just meant
Yes. I believe
our kids were not our kids were not doing stuff, and I'm okay with it. I'm just trying to figure out, and I think we definitely don't stop since we just got started. I totally agree with that. I'm just trying to figure out how where the counting the days is coming from.
I believe that the language that we used was this is not an extenuation of the break. And because we use that language that they were on duty or on call to be on duty. And because of that, then the requirements, we can't make that retroactive, or go backwards. We just need to handle it going forward. But the April break would become, we either stop it and take our regular break and stay with our regular calendar, or we push that towards the end of the school year.
But you will know more about what our needs are after you receive some waiver presentation and maybe some response from the state.
The waivers have already been granted, so they're already telling us we apply for those. So I mean, we're good with that. It's just boards have to approve applying for the waivers. The reality is it's really the flex time is the issue that's been accumulated already.
Because at one meeting, at the other meeting, we were talking about would we extend into summer school? And now we're talking about taking days away. So I'm just trying to figure out our set number of days.
And the reality is as far as extending summer school by contractual law, the governor, and the commissioner could say, we're going to extend school into the summertime to make up for some of this lost instructional time. But they've got Chapter 21 contracts that they have to take into consideration. And that's where it all becomes very convoluted. So, my biggest priority right now is the April break and what we do with it. But I don't believe we need to take at this point in time, take another week off.
Well, is the board comfortable with the idea of making the decision about, we all agree that we should not take the April break and revisit the calendar issue at our April meeting?
I'm comfortable with the not taking April break, but as G is saying, there's not a whole lot left in the school year. There's not a whole lot of days that he can change.
And as long as we get our days, if y'all calculated it and we get those days, I just was kind of confused because, you know, it's like we were doing opposite, saying we want them to be in school longer, and now we're doing the opposite. But if it's the minutes, the number of minutes, I'm fine with that. If that for number one.
I just want to be clear. That's not what number one's talking about. He's saying that we are giving him, the way I'm reading it, we're giving him the authority to make any changes from now until the 90 days are over. So yes, I realize there's no days on there, but essentially we're giving away that authority as a board to let him make any decision he wants on the calendar. I'm just stating that's what the resolution is saying. So if we want to take that off and then also vote on what the calendar looks like, I mean, I'm okay with that. And then noting too, like the April break starts in 1 week. Like, so you got to communicate to parents, students, teachers, not only that there's not an April break, but what has to happen during this April break for next week.
Well, Michael, are you suggesting, or do you have any concerns that we'll have a problem continuing the educational process during that April break week?
I mean, it makes sense to me to continue on. It's just that we're less than a week away and we haven't communicated that to really anybody. And now we're having to make that's a big change. Not only there, but then it would also change that last week of school, which, I mean, I get it. We're all in changes, but this resolution saying that we're giving Mr. G the authority to make that change without consulting us or discussing it with us.
I read number one a little bit differently because it says authority to alter the district's 2019 to 2020 school year. So that would only be until May. We are still giving him the authority for the 90 days on the other things that we've agreed on. But for that, and to piggyback on that, I don't think we can throw into this agenda the approval of adding that week on to the end of the school year because it's not on our agenda. I think we get into some issues with just saying we want to decide and vote on that tonight. I think that's something we have to do separately.
So are you guys wanting to specifically only concentrate on the one date, which is spring break, the second spring break, or you don't want to give him the authority to make changes for the remainder of the school year?
Well, I think Julie's point is that the resolution provides kind of an all-encompassing, and I think we either limit that or you take it all-encompassing. I don't know that you can say I'm going to go forever. You can say for the next 2 weeks, for example, which give him the authority to fix spring break based on what he's heard and come back and address the rest in April. But I don't think you can say all or nothing without, if you do nothing, we've got a problem with the spring break because we have a calendar that's set. We as a board adopted it. I think we have to fix that piece of it somehow. And that's either giving him the authority to do that and fix that one piece by limiting this, or you give him all the authority, he fixes it, and we come back and argue with him in the April meeting about issues. So I think it's a matter of what you're comfortable with him doing at this point in time.
That's a good point to me. Can we just alter it to say until the next April meeting? So then that he can change the spring break for the temporary, and then we'll
Michael,
come back.
Do you mind me asking what the issue with the calendar is? Because there's not really a whole lot that we can do with the calendar. Like I said, it only goes through through May. So what is your main issue with adjusting?
No.
I really thought that would be the least of the ones that would be contested, honestly.
Well, I mean, I've got no issue with the calendar, and I realize there's not much to change, but, and I get that this is a recommendation from TASB, but TASB is also talking to districts that are little bitty, like with 100 kids. So they have to kind of put everything in perspective. If something comes up later on this year, we can always meet, but that's not what this number one's saying. Number one saying it's giving you the authority from now until 90 days to make any changes to the calendar. I guess I just don't understand. It says as necessitated by the emergency closure. I guess the only necessary change is just for this next week for spring break.
Is there any further discussion that anyone wants to have, or at this point in time, I'll entertain whatever motions board members want to make to try to move forward.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we go with it the way it is. I make a motion to approve the resolution for certain delegation of authority to the superintendent as presented.
It's a motion by Mr. Ham. Is there a second?
Second.
A second by Mr. Bisco. Is there further discussion? I don't see, I don't see you. I'm sorry, Mr. Strange. Do you want to make further discussion or have further discussion?
No,
Okay.
sir.
Then we'll go through a roll call vote on this issue. Mr. Ham,
Yes.
Ms. Carruthers,
Yes.
Ms. Webb,
Yes.
Mr. Bisco,
Yes.
Mr. Strange,
No.
Mr. Hunt,
He's got a thumbs up.
yes. And Mr. Clark votes yes. So that is 6 in favor, 1 opposed. Do you have that, Leslie?
Got it.
Mr. Strange is the only no. We good, Leslie?
Yes.
All right. We now move on to item D, discuss and approve resolution for emergency purchases and procurement. Mr. G.
Okay, this was one that I believe that Ms. Webb brought up at the previous meeting, and at that time I said I really didn't foresee anything. The only thing that I could really see coming up with emergency purchase would be technology because of the situation that we're in. But once again, that would be something that would most definitely be brought to the board, and it just gives me authority to sit there and kind of maneuver through some of the purchasing processes faster. But it wouldn't be done without basically talking to the board.
Does anyone have any issues with regard to this resolution?
When you say
Couple
talking to the board, you
questions.
just, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Andrew.
Go ahead.
When you say talking to the board, you just mean like by phone call?
Yes, and let you know kind of where we are. Some of the issues are mobile hotspots. I've been talking with Mr. Franklin about extending our one-to-one initiative possibly to accommodate for some of the glaring holes that we're seeing right now. We're working and talking with the city to look at some partnerships for some Wi-Fi towers throughout the city to help with that. But those would cost money, and I think those discussions would be brought up with you, so that you know. But if it were in a pinch, and right now, I really don't see this being a major thing that would be taking place right now. And once again, this was not my recommendation. This came from our attorneys because of the situation we're in and what other districts are putting in place.
Mr. Bisco, you had a question.
Who had a question?
Mr. Bisco did, but I think shows he's muted right now. He's working on it.
Okay.
Hang on.
Julie, did you see this as being, to do this resolution rather than to have an emergency meeting if we needed to have an emergency meeting on something like this? Is that what your thought was?
Hard to tell, because whenever I brought this up, it was our first meeting and when we were dealing with this. And so that was just my initial thought, was how fast is this going to kind of progress? Or what's our situation going to look like? Now that I see how it's evolving, it's kind of, I don't know if it's as dire as it was before, but I can see, I can see some benefits from it, just from a standpoint of we're not even to the peak of where we could be in this, and the realization of what needs to be done. That's my own concern. I think it's a very heavy weight to carry. And I would trust that the superintendent would make the right calls on that. But I don't know at this time. I mean, I think it's a good conversation to have, and that's kind of where I'm at right now. I don't think it's something to take lightly, but at the same time, I can see the benefit for it.
Mr. Bisco, I think you're up now.
Okay, just looking through it again. There's no time limit on the resolution for him to be authorized to do this. Also, there's, I know he's authorized up to $50,000, and you don't have a top limit on that, so he could actually approve up to whatever we have in the bank. I just don't see the need for this one. If there is something that needs to purchase that's over the $50,000 limit that he already has, I think that would be something that should be discussed amongst the board. And the third thing is, if nothing else, if he did have the authority to do this, I'd like him to at least run that information either by some member of the school board, or either president or vice president, if he was going to make a purchase over that. I don't see the need for this resolution, to be honest with you. But with today's, as you say, that a month ago we didn't see a lot of needs that we're having right now. But I don't see this, as long as we're able to still do a quorum and do video or phone conferences. I don't see the need for this.
Mr. Strange.
Thank you. I agree. One, the date's not on there, and then two, there's not a cap. So, and as I was talking about on the previous one, I mean, we can, if it's something that's a dire need, 3 days is our limit, right? So that's the smallest amount of time we can get together. I don't know if we'll be making any purchases within less than 3 days, if we can just meet with a special meeting. So.
And I would say that this is the one when I didn't feel a need for this one at the beginning. This was, like I said, a recommendation of the attorneys, and Mr. Adams thought that it would be okay to leave it in there because just as a fail safe, but I do not see a specific need for it. So.
And my question was on the technology side, and do we know how many of our students are without technology right now? And that might give us some idea of that upper number. If we're talking about supplying either Chromebooks or something to those who don't have it, do we know kind of what that number looks like?
Mr. Franklin would have a better number on that. We discussed it at our meeting today, but we didn't have numbers at that time. I don't know. Mr. Franklin, do you have any idea on the numbers?
Yeah, we've distributed, let me pull up my sheet here. We've got somewhere between 1,600 and 1,700 Chromebooks that have been distributed. And that's going to be, that's going to be a little more than half of our population. But then, the way we took our surveys, each campus has an individual sheet where the teachers or whoever was making the calls was marking where they were. So it's not like I don't have and some of the notes are different. Some of the fields where the input was in there is a little bit different. So it's not a very good controlled data set. It's not to say I can't go in, and we're working on getting very accurate numbers for it. I just have, it's a little bit tricky. It's a little time consuming because of the inconsistency across. But and I know too that based on the initial survey results, there's roughly in the neighborhood of 200-ish that'll be on the top side of homes who do not have internet access or are reporting that. So we've got a few things to think about on it.
John made the recommendation in the chat to table the item until a later meeting or emergency meeting if needed.
I
Is
don't
that a
think
motion?
Yeah, no motion has been made, so we just don't have to act on it. We can move on, right?
We can either
Be my
deny the motion.
recommendation.
Do you want to just table or deny it? That's the question.
There's no motion.
No, there's no motion made again, but normally the process would be, I'll entertain a motion and see if one is made. If there's not one made, then that item doesn't come up for a vote, obviously. So I'll open the question now. Is there a motion with regard to the resolution for emergency purchases and procurement? The chair hears no motion. I can't see Mr. Hunt. Does anyone notice or hear from him if he's making any?
No, he's not making a motion.
Okay. Then hearing no motion with regard to item D, we'll move on to item E. And that is discuss and approve resolution on grading and GPA. Mr. G.
And at this time, our task force is still in working to garner information. We've sent out a survey. I have Dr. Vu and Dr. Devlin, who's heading up that task force on with us. They could give you more information. But at this point in time, I don't believe that they're ready to make a recommendation to me to make a decision on it. And we could probably just come back to it and table it.
Does any board member need further
On the
discussion?
process, Dr. Vu and Dr. Devlin will be able to give that to you in more detail.
Board members, open the question. Is anyone more information from Dr. Vu or Dr. Devlin?
Just to be clear, we can, you're saying we could just table this until they have more information. When would that be? Are you thinking that would be an emergency meeting or wait till the April meeting that's scheduled?
Mr. G, is there any time constraint?
A lot of districts are passing them already. You know, it could wait till our April board meeting, but there may be people who wanted, parents and families that want to know what our procedures are before that time. Dr. Devlin, Dr. Vu, how long do you think it's going to take to wrap up the task force?
Well, we already have a solid draft of where we're going. I can show you here if I can share my screen, what we have. Oh, the host disabled screen sharing. Is it possible that I could share my screen? Brian?
Working on it. One moment.
Okay.
It's going to be one of those settings that they've automatically locked down because of all of the
Sure. I promise I won't hijack anything and share anything inappropriate.
But while you're trying to get your screen up, John, will you read the resolution as it's stated? Because it's not pulling up for me.
All I have is a motion to approve the resolution on grading and matters. I don't have a special resolution otherwise. It says information be provided at the time of the meeting.
Yes.
I think we should just table this to the next meeting.
Yeah.
I agree.
You don't have enough information to vote on it.
Yeah.
Well, I think the thing was, it was just going to give me the authority to make a decision based off the committee. And like I said, we don't have the committee information yet. And honestly, this is one that I think the board would need to take action on. So.
If I can share my screen, if that's an option, I do want to show you. So we put together the task force. We have representatives from all of the campuses. We have a teacher representing, we have a special ed teacher who's on the committee. we have pre-AP, and then we have Miss Newcomer, who's a junior high teacher. We have Miss Newcomer, who's representing CT and AP. So we're trying to get, multiple perspectives. And then we have a survey that went out this weekend to parents and teachers as well, just to make sure that we're getting it. And so what we realized when we got that information is that we knew that there was going to be, layers, I guess, in terms of where people were. But what we found, and I have to credit Mr. Creasy at the high school for putting this together for us, but he's created these pivot tables. So we have teachers, we have parents, and we'll have students. So these are all the questions that are on the survey. And you can go here and you can decide, do I want to see what's happening at the high school and maybe the junior high here? And so you can see where they fall. And so what's really interesting to me, depending on the question, is you can look at Delaney and you can look at Patterson, and you can kind of see how even with the 2 elementary campuses, that makes a difference. Can you see this? I'm trying to, it's really neat, the way that they did this. So on each page is one of the questions from the survey. So you can see homework assignments, questions about pass fail, questions about, so here's the grading system. So you click here and you can say, here's where we fall across all of the campuses. And then you have the key over here. So pass fail, I think we should do standard numeric grades. I don't know. I have other. And then you can click here and you can see where we fall. This is how the high school feels. When you add the junior high, it's a little bit different. When you add JAA, and it's really rich data that makes someone like me very excited. And so it's neat. But then you can also see the individual comments. So those have been really enlightening to see how families feel about some of the different questions that we asked. And so all of that to say, we knew it was going to be, we knew that there were going to be some disagreement, and we were going to have to make some compromises. But in looking at the data between parents and teachers, and then we actually had lots of responses from students, we need more time. We need more time. And all of that to say, I just want to show you that we're taking this so seriously, and we're doing everything that we can to take into account multiple feedback from multiple stakeholder groups. We know that this can have a really big impact on the lives of our families and our students and our teachers. And we want to make sure that we are giving it the attention it deserves.
Thank you. I think on behalf of the board and everyone, we appreciate all the work that you and Dr. Devlin are putting in. Just looking across the screen, I think everyone is on board giving you more time. So unless I see any opposition, we're going to move off of item E, giving Dr. Devlin and Dr. Vu more time to get the data to us, and we can bring it up at another meeting as necessary.
Yeah, John Hunt just said if we need a special meeting, we can do that. He put that in the chat. So.
Okay. That takes care of all of the new business. And that brings us to item 5, review and discuss possible approval of hiring a roof consultant, closed session per Texas Government Code 551.071. Is there a need to go into this session?
Yes.
Okay. So having said that, for purposes of time, I have it 7:13, and we will now end the regular session and move into executive session. And we will return after executive session for any action that might be necessary with regard to the items under 551.071. Again, the time is 7:13, and we will now go out of regular session into executive session.